the way we do this is we talk, and anybody wants to say anything about the pieces of art, please do feel free in any moment. It's a conversation. So I'm going to start today talking a little bit about some differences between Eastern painting and the West. And both of these art pieces are in the Met in New York. And I personally, I almost always end up my visit in the Met at the Chinese section because it's so meditative and calming, and there's something about it that just there's something about it that just there's something about it that just really calms the mind. And so you have this painting on the left here from around 1200, and you have a George Seurat that is on the right here. One of the biggest differences between Eastern painting and Western painting is the point of view of the viewer and the feeling that projects into the work and into the body of the viewer and into us as we look at it. And that happens through the space. So the one immediate feeling that you have when you look at an Eastern piece is that nature is huge, we're small. You know, usually we are looking a little bit high from a distance, either looking additionally high, but also low. And this magnitude, this thing gives it magnitude. It gives this awe in front of nature. Where in the Western side, usually the viewer is much more human size. The human us at the center. It's less about nature being this magical, this huge thing in front that we kind of look up to. And you can see that in the point of view in the Seurat, it's somewhere in the middle. You know, we have a human scale. If you see this tree, it completely, and just the distance between even just the beginning of the painting and where we might stay until we reach this tree. And then the immense space all the way back to this house here, and you can feel like the space around these buildings, but it feels something we experience as we walk in our street. You know, it's a human size. We connect in that way. But if you go into the Chinese, this is a small figure here walking. And you look from high above, far, you know, and look down, and then you can kind of walk around this little mountain and travel behind this tree, and then this amazing, you know, horizon line of the mountain that you suddenly look up. So you look down over here, but you're starting to look a little higher here, and it's interesting for me to have these two side by side, obviously because of these points of view and these different ways of engaging in the world. You know, it's also how there's a certain kind of fog that you travel through space, you know, in all the Chinese work, through this kind of like eraser fog. You know, it lets you move through things. You know, all the forms kind of blend with each other. They connect, they move through each other, through this air. You know, and it's true even with the air that is in front of an object. You feel air going from you to that tree, you know. And so Seurat does this very, very interesting as well in all his amazing drawings. He does this almost in the opposite way. It's through the dark. The darkness in his paint, in his drawings, are always lets you travel through forms. You know, they become almost the white of the paper that we know as we start drawing, that we use almost immediately. He does it almost the opposite, through this darkness that kind of travels through the forms and blends them. And just what I also love in this connection is how, for instance, there's this tree here that that creates a space that you have to get to, and then another space from it to the next. And it's so beautifully done. You know, you feel the air around the tree everywhere. It's like completely. And in the Chinese painting, which is almost always true as well, you feel the same. And the tree almost kind of lets you travel and puts that first thing you stumble upon as you travel in the painting, in the space. Obviously, there are many differences and additional differences. You know, I always kind of contemplate a Chinese painter being somebody like of that time, someone who would sit there, maybe not even do much for a while, and then after engaging with that space, with that place for a while, maybe weeks on end, would then know how to kind of come and do it. So it can happen in a very fast calligraphy way, but it comes after a long meditative time with that landscape. And I think for Seurat, it's probably also a slow drawing, but I wouldn't necessarily think of it in that way. You know? I think he would play with the forms. He would play with them and engage in that way. But I love his drawings. They're very beautiful. Yeah. Any thoughts? Please feel free.
Yeah, Dov, maybe bring it back to the group for 1 second, just so we can.
Yeah.
So we can all see each other. Remember that we're all like, I like to think of this as we're all like maybe sitting around a bar or something, around a table, and you know, Dov's talking about these paintings. You know, jump in anytime. Yep. Any thoughts? And if you don't, no problem. We'll do this regularly throughout the talk.
Absolutely.
But it is interesting, Dov, and I think I might be like recycling this from some art class I had once. But what you said in the beginning about the differences, one of the differences, at least between those two pieces, is like the Seurat. I think of myself in that space, and the Chinese painting, I don't. You know, they're both beautiful, but it's like a different. My response is different.
Yeah, I feel. Yeah, I have the same way. I mean, I feel my scale, my size in the Seurat. Like I feel, I don't know how to say it, but I do find my mind wandering in the Chinese, as opposed to my body. You know, it's almost like my mental escape can go there.
That's interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
That's cool.
It's like my body goes, the physicality of my body goes in the Seurat, but my mind is lost in that Chinese. You know.
To me, the Chinese is. Sorry. I'm sorry. The Seurat is very small, isn't it? The
Seurat?
Scale of the. Yes.
The Seurat, it's probably about the size. Yeah, it's not big. And also that Chinese is small. It's not a big Chinese.
Yeah.
And that shape of it is beautiful too. I didn't get to talk about that.
I would say the Chinese looks like it's the first thing I saw when I walked out in the morning in a beautiful scene. It's morning light, whereas the Seurat is more like evening light.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That could be true. He definitely is connected somehow into the night, you know, in his drawings. The darkness is something he one of our teachers that we talked about last week, Rosemary Beck, always said there's two kinds of painters. There's the painters that paint dark on light, and there's the painters that paint light on dark. And each one kind of goes to one or the other. I don't know if that's true. There's no rules in this business, but there's something in that thought that I think Seurat is like somebody who uses the dark, you know, and comes and pushes light out of the dark.
Yeah, he's pulling it out. Absolutely.
Absolutely putting it out. And I don't think the Chinese work like that. And you know, it's like they almost take matter out of air into this thing. It's pretty interesting. I mean, it's, yeah. Shall we?
We talked about, at the beginning, you talk about Eastern and Western. And of course, when we think about Eastern, it's always, our mind goes to either Japanese or Chinese art. But there are a lot of other Asian or Eastern art that it's almost like completely the opposite of the Chinese and the Japanese, where they have a lot of space, a lot, not empty space, but it's more of human are very small and nature is big. But in artworks such as in Southeast Asia or India or Thailand or Indonesia, for that matter, the human is always surrounded by nature. So the canvas, the piece is always extremely the opposite of the Chinese and Japanese. Very busy. It's almost like there's no space for eyes to go to. So it's just it's always the comparison is Japanese and or Chinese for Eastern, and we forget about the rest of.
I absolutely agree, and hopefully we'll get to them, because there are other places here, and I agree with what you said. It's obviously Eastern is not just one thing. I mean, there's many differences in many countries and in many ways. The Chinese obviously is huge, and it's an important part of it. But you're right. It's a great point.
Let's. Sorry, if somebody else has something to say, go ahead.
I was going to ask you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
Is the first one an ink drawing and the second one is graphite?
Definitely the first one is ink. The second one, I think he uses it's either charcoal or graphite. I'm not 100% sure in this one.
Did Valerie have something to say?
No, I was just wondering about the fact that, you know, the Asian cultures, you know, the writing, I mean, you know, how we read from right to left, and the way, I think in a lot of art, I don't know, the composition is so different. It's more vertical. And you know, when I look at Japanese or Chinese arts, when I've been going to museum, everything is always a different scale that way. More, do you know what I'm talking about? More vertical, more lined up.
Absolutely. I think
versus, you know, for us Westerners, I don't know. I wonder if the mind already has some issue when they create culturally, you know, by depicting something that is already part of the culture. You know what I mean? I can't explain exactly what I'm trying to say, but just referring to the writing, you know, the way the Asian people write. I don't know if it has something to do with it, but when I look at this landscape you are showing right now, for me there is that big, you know, vertical, and
it's interesting the way you're used to, like, you know, organizing a page. Sure, you know, it's something you do every day is read. You know, it's an interaction with a page.
Yeah, and I just wonder, the art sometimes it just takes the same state of mind, you know, and instead of having it more like you were mentioning, the dimension was for Westerners were more like a close up, or I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm totally off the subject, but
no,
when you look at the art, it's so different, and you wonder why is it so different, you know.
I think you have a really good point in terms of the size and of the pieces and the way that the proportions are. It's if I go back to that for a second, I'll put back the screen. I think there is something else that's more important than close up and far, and I think that is the point of view of the viewer, which I think is something that is very, very unique to Chinese painting and the West, as opposed to the West. And that is, it's the feeling that you are in a certain place looking down, and also looking up. It's almost like, we will look at it in a second in Cézanne, you'll see something similar, but with a different scale. But But that point of view is something that I think is huge in Chinese painting. And it's not so much about close-up versus far, because it could also be close-up, but you'll still have this point of view. Hopefully we can look at an example.
Let's move on for a second to clarify your point. I think that's cool. Good point to jump off.
Yep. Here we go. Here's Cézanne on the left here, and a big, like you mentioned, a big vertical. This is a big painting.
Yeah, a big vertical. Yeah.
It's a long vertical, and it lends itself to that landscape, to that way of seeing a mountain that rises up high, and this tree the tree that grows, and also it's also, again, look how high you are looking at this. You're almost at the height of the top of that tree. You know, that's where you start. That's where your eyes are as the viewer. So you're in a very different place than in the Cézanne here. You are, you know, you're very close. But you're also down. It has a human size to you. You know, it has a human location. It's a much slower location of looking. And I think Cézanne is one of those painters that was so attuned to his point of view. You always look and realize that he is looking at something, but he's moving. You know, it's not a fixed camera. It's not a fixed eye. It's his whole body that is looking at it. That is experiencing this watermelon, or experiencing these fruit, or this vase. And because of that, because he keeps on moving, they move as well. They continuously move. He continuously changes, you know, how they are drawn in relation to each other. You know, they always move. He always refines and finds. He never just fills in. There's nothing that is static. It completely feels complete, but he's moving them all the time, continuously moving them, because he has, as the painter, you know, he experiences this side, and then the one side of the left side, and then the right side, then the back side, and then he looks up and he looks down, he looks to the side. So all of these points of view and how his head and his neck and his arm move are reflected in the work. And in the Chinese, you have that almost similarly, almost very different, because you look up to the mountain, but you look down at the you know, here at the bottom of the tree, and at this rocks and this river. And just the fact this is feeling like water, you know, even though it's nothing painted on here, and this feels like air, is insane. It's amazing. I mean, how is it? That's pure magic to me. You know, it's pure magic. How can they change the material or the texture without doing anything on the canvas? And
It's kind of sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
This kind of go back to your first presentation, like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
When you taught us how to see painting, and how the triangle, the power of triangle. Seems to be like, it dawned on me that, he talked about that triangle 2 weeks ago. And if you look at these two paintings, it really is kind of these two makes our eyes going back and forth, up and down, to the left and to the right and down. So it's kind of relate to what you talked about 2 weeks ago. So it's very cool.
Thank you.
Hey, Dov, could you comment on the use of fog or overly soft diffuse light, which both these are taking advantage of?
Yeah, you know, I think it's just something that painter experiences in front of their motif, and it's just a way that you travel. You know, you travel through it. You travel through the air that way, and Cézanne can leave certain things open because they feel closed. You know, they feel enough. There's no need to go there.
I agree with you as far as like Cézanne goes, as specifically to the comment you just made about experience in front of the motif. But the Chinese painting, I feel like it's, you know, it's more like a tool, something that's brought to the painting, whether it's experienced or
idea,
not.
or
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, just given the medium, a person is probably not out there painting in front of a mountain with fog. I don't, I mean, like there's such ephemeral, the ink and the paper and whatnot. I think it's more of a concept, but experience, but still a concept,
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right, but that doesn't. It's like, I think what you're saying is that the experience in that, but that can be kept in the memory and later painted.
Yes, definitely. But additionally, I think it's also like a visual tradition. I mean, it's like a consistent. It's not like here's just one of those paintings that has fog in it. There's thousands of paintings that have fog in them. It's like a
yeah. But I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah,
I still think that would be in that comes from the nature in that place. I don't think that it's just.
I agree. But I mean, it's like, but it there's a different context for that concept when you're like looking at Cézanne as opposed to his contemporaries. There's.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to describe it further than that, but it's.
No, I hear your point. I think it's a good point in that there are a lot of methods that painters accumulate that then they use. We can call it technique or method, and in that sense, then the painter needs to make that real. So it's not enough just to have that technique, but it's almost like a book with a lot of different ways to do certain things, and that need to be in the painting necessarily. It's also true in like Venetian painting. It's not just Chinese. Like there's a way to paint a tree or a way to
right.
So, but then the great painters take that way and make it specific and real. And a lot of good painters use it wonderfully, but it's not as great. Or something. So I think is that your point? Is that kind of like.
Maybe so. I might not be clear enough beyond what I just said. So
it seems the traditional Chinese technique is so precise and detailed that it allows a mood of being ethereal, whereas the Cézanne and the Seurat, in a similar way, are just kind of gritty, and it feels more real, more movement. I think their technique is free flowing, and it allows you to see more life in it. The Chinese, definitely, it's almost calligraphy. And they carried their technique through their culture and society. And it does feel very magical.
absolutely.
I absolutely agree with all you said. The only point I would make is I think calligraphy happens here as well in the Cézanne, for instance.
Do you?
I do. I think it's I think if we zoom into this painting, to this little waterfall, zoom, something I don't, and you just look here, that, his calligraphy is here. It's absolutely here. It's almost like a Chinese,
But Dov, I mean, I think the word calligraphy it's a really specific thing, and just knowing what I know of Cézanne, the whole thing was like, the experience in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's almost the opposite in a way. I mean, he winds up by default with his own, calligraphy, so to speak. It's his own language, his own marks. But it's not, calligraphy is like practicing a certain mark and getting it perfect. And what does perfect mean? It's or bring it around to what you mean. But that's my response to what you just said.
I see calligraphy, and I might be wrong, is a way to transfer energy through the hand into the paint.
Okay.
And that energy is encapsulated in the mark, you know, and it can happen instantaneously in front of the motif right there and in the moment, like Chris said, or maybe with the Chinese over a much longer time, maybe not even in the space itself. I'm more of a romantic. I see the monk sitting on the mountain with the piece right there, 2 weeks not eating and just thinking, and then coming with this painting in half an hour.
I can definitely see. Yeah, I can see that. I think the biggest difference for me is like in calligraphy, and again, I am not like studied in the tradition either, but in my, you know, probably somewhat ignorant grasp of calligraphy, my understanding is that like that mark already exists before you make it, and there's a right way to do it, you know.
Yeah.
And with the Cézanne, that's not the case. And but I think there's so
much training in both. There's so much training. I mean, this to get to this quality of Chinese painting, there's so much training and so much work. And in Cézanne, this watercolor is from 1900 to 1906. That's the last 6 years of his life. That's a whole life of work into this. You know, so
I agree with you completely. I understand what you're saying. But I still think there's a difference because writing is different.
Yeah.
Well, I've got an example of, I practice Tai Chi. I've done this for 20 some years now.
Awesome.
And what I've noticed with my practice of Tai Chi is that it's like what I think Chris is talking about with calligraphy. You're practicing a form to a precise, measure, and you're repeating that practice over and over again. And then there's a certain point with the practice that it's no longer, you no longer need the mind because it's been so trained into the body. And in that state of having a connection with the energy that I think Dov is talking about, you're free from the interference of the mind and of the body, for that matter, because you get to a state where you're so relaxed in the form that all your awareness is on the energy, and it's in the moving of the energy. And the reason that energy can move is because you practiced the form so long and so slow and so steady that flow of energy is just allowed to happen. And you're allowed to have that awareness of the energy because of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that might apply to what both of you are talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That was well said. It applies to both.
Dov,
sorry. Go on, Jennifer.
I was just going to say that I admire your romantic viewpoint of what Cézanne did, as well as the Chinese. But if I picture myself planning to execute these two separate pieces, on the one, I can see that I would be very deliberate, very precise. The other one, it's like it kind of would fall out of my head.
Which one is which?
The Cézanne definitely just makes you want to roll in the paint, So it feels very tactile. But I don't get that from the Chinese.
And you don't feel the Chinese is tactile?
Not so much. It's
really?
Many wonderful things, but it's just got its own different quality.
That's cool. It does. It definitely has its own quality.
Yeah.
But it's not tactile in the sense that you can hold it in your hand, and that goes. Mm-hmm. That's connected to what we said before. You can't hold it in your hand, but you feel it you know, it's like you feel the air or the clarity of the air, you know, you feel, and so to me, it's just this tactile in a way, but it's a different type.
Well, if I think of painting that,
Yeah.
it makes my shoulders tight.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Maybe, yeah.
Well, if I thought I had to do it, that would definitely
Yeah.
make my shoulders
Yeah.
tight.
Yes.
But you know, but I do think that it's possible that the experience would be different standing in front of it for an hour or so. But I don't know.
Probably.
But Dov, let's maybe let's
move.
go on to another slide
Yeah.
for a second, and then head
Absolutely.
back to the group.
Yep. Just putting another two pieces here. Again, one from China, from the 13th century, and from Iran, which is more related. What we talked about. It's Eastern in a way. It's Middle Eastern, but almost Eastern. And you know, we talked about calligraphy, and this is exactly why I put this here, to show this amazingly beautiful calligraphy on this plate. And you know, these plates are just like insanely perfect. You know, they're when you look at them, it's just like mind blowing. Because the paint is almost like moving. It's in the photo, it's hard to get that experience, but in real life, it's like it's so perfect. The location, you know, the way it's like creating all these different shapes, and it's like design at the highest level, and when it's at the highest level, it's not any different than any type of art. You know, it's like it's the highest meaning of it. And so I think it also relates something in that circular, you know, the circle and then another circle and then the middle, obviously relates to, I think, how the Chinese think about these window type. They're still based on the vertical and horizontal, like any painting, but obviously they're not necessarily just a line and a vertical line and a horizontal line of a rectangle. They're giving you this shape to look into. That, so it gives you that feeling that you're in a cave, you know, you're in a little place and you're looking out to the world, out to this big nature or this big beautiful place. It's intimate, but it's also with a huge amount of awe to nature. So I think the way the brush works and the brush of the branches, and you know, the way these drawings are made here, they're very similar to this, you know, to how these are trying to create this language. It's amazingly beautiful language on these plates. Yeah, any thoughts, please?
Yeah, bring back to the group for a second, Dov.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is
Yep.
is the imagery on the plate, does it say something, or is that those letter forms?
I'm sure it does. I can't tell you what it is, unfortunately, but I don't know. But it's it's Arabic. So.
Yeah, if the artist of the plate, if he or she were a Muslim, they're not allowed to paint like face, or that's why most of the Arabic calligraphy is a part of art itself.
Yeah.
Because they were not, supposedly they're not allowed to create something that people would idolize, you know. So,
Say that again, they're not allowed to create a face. What did you say? I'm sorry.
So in a Muslim world, you know how in Christianity you can paint Jesus Christus, right?
Right.
They're not allowed to do that. So, and they're not also allowed to say paint a dog or like an object. So that's why they have a lot of the calligraphy kind of art, and it's very intricate. It's extremely beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually have a little story that from a visit. Since I grew up in Israel, I used to go to Egypt, to the Sinai Desert, and I once tried to draw one of the Bedouin hosts that were around, and I started drawing this person, and he got very, very upset with me because it was doing exactly what you just said. You're not, it's almost like by drawing him, I'm almost taking some sort of energy from him. I'm actually kind of hurting him in some way. So we got really upset. It was pretty intense moment, and then I realized that that's not something you do, and so I think it relates to what you said.
It's really interesting. Unless anybody else has something to say, maybe we advance.
Yeah. Absolutely. Not very Eastern Western.
Yeah, I was about to say this
here.
This is a shift.
it's a shift, but I'd like to try and relate this somehow as well, because I do think Van Gogh is somewhat closer to the Eastern way than Gauguin here, and both are magical paintings. They actually hang very close to each other at MoMA, and this Van Gogh is just an insanely amazing painting. This person is so alive and able to move and walk and talk, and it's ridiculous. But the way he paints the background here, these types of calligraphy, these types of marking are just unbelievably beautiful and moving, and tell you the story of this person, it's his personality, and opposite to that, is Gauguin here. So I think it's an amazing painting by him. Just the way he composes this painting with this diagonal here, and this fruit that's falling and kind of touching the bottom here, and these flying books, but they completely sit them, and it's like just the way he's composing this piece is an incredible way of seeing, and then this lamp here, and this head, and this finger here, just the way this is showing you the space, and the anatomy is so good. I mean, I think of this hand and this, all of it, but it's also really intense. It's like really, they're so different, in that way. It's like he's intense too, but it's to me, it's much more, it's calming, and this is a much more intense. This is a really intense painting. Every time I see it in real life.
Is that from his earlier work, Cézanne?
Sorry. No, this is Gauguin.
Oh, Gauguin.
It's 89. So
okay. Sorry, I was mistaken. Sorry.
It's actually painted the same year as this Van Gogh.
Okay.
The
magical composition. Yeah.
This has kind of a Sgt. Pepper's feel to me. It's like an album cover almost from the Beatles.
What, the Gauguin?
The first one, the Van Gogh.
Oh, the Van Gogh. Wow.
That is so beautiful.
Yep.
I just love that.
That also reminds me of the more recent artist. He's from the U.S. He painted Barack Obama with he was
yeah.
And then there's this all green flower that reminds me of that.
You got to see him in real life. I'm going to say something not so good, but because graphically, if you put it on the computer screen, it would look pretty okay. In real life, it's just, to me, like horrendous. But that's just me. He's there.
You mean the more recent, the one that I mentioned? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Him. I don't know. It's like really.
So it's good
flat.
on magazine.
It's really good on magazine, and when you go in front of the painting, it's like got zero mass, zero weight, and I think zero space. And I think that's what we keep on talking about, because the quality of painting that can really do specifically something that no other medium can do is bring that experience of life, and that experience of
Bring it back to the group for 1 second.
Yeah. So Yep.
I just want to make a point here for a second that like if you respond to a painting, that response is real, no matter
Absolutely.
like there's paintings that I've always loved that, like, you know, pre me having any kind of education, during my education, post education, and, you know, whatever my and then even me, like, actually judging the fact that I loved the painting, and then suspending that judgment later. It's like if you respond to an image, you respond to an image that's real, it's visceral.
Yeah.
So you know, so like if you find that there's a painting that you always loved, and then you stand in front of it in real life, and then many years later you realize that it might not be fulfilling all the objectives that paintings can fulfill, that doesn't matter, because the love for the painting is the most real thing, you know.
Absolutely.
So like when Dov is talking about some of the gaps, say, between the painting in question and the Van Gogh, those are real. It's true, but it shouldn't necessarily affect your opinion or your response to, you know, to that other painting.
I 100% agree, and that's a great point, because when I say that, it's just me, and it's just my own, and I think that you know, we get our inspiration and our feelings from, like Chris said, from so many different things, and they're very real for us. It doesn't mean they're all Van Gogh or all, you know, but that, you know, but I also don't want to not say that in some way, because it's just us talking, you know. So
right, but it's also, I mean,
yeah.
the point can be very difficult to make, like splitting hairs, or it's a fine or delicate point, because like there are differences that are not just subjective. You know, if it's like, if we look at the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge,
Yeah,
we can talk about their beauty. You know, the Manhattan Bridge, I think, is kind of clunky and not very nice to look at. The Brooklyn Bridge is like sublime. It's beautiful. It's a work of art. But no one can argue with the engineering behind the two of them. They both survived over 100 years and 1 billion tons of, you know, product commerce going over them, you know, hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not going to argue with the engineer of those two paintings, of those two bridges. So it'd be like that if you brought that analogy to paintings, you know, there's like engineering of the painting, and then there's your subjective view of the painting.
Yeah, I totally agree that there's a lot of things that are just truthful in painting, and there's no doubting that. I mean, I don't think, you know. So
I'm just saying that just in case anybody's like, you know, has ever has a thought that like they, you know, should adjust their opinion about a painting for some reason, because Dov gets very passionate.
I get very passionate. To me, it's just really flat. You know, that's it. I'm just gonna have to say it again.
Yeah, I agree. But, yeah.
But that doesn't mean it can really be, for what Chris is saying. I don't think that doesn't mean that can generate a huge amount of feeling for anyone. I mean, or an important feeling even. You know.
Hey, Dov, I've got a question for you on one of those two paintings. Is it the Gauguin? I think it is. Obviously, there's an intense look in the eye, and the hand is intense. What do you think? Do you think that hard vertical line streaking across the canvas for the edge of the table kind of adds to a little bit of intensity there?
You mean the tabletop edge here?
Yeah, the tabletop just, there's a
so
vertical
strong
line, and then there's this huge striking angle. To me, it adds to the intensity of the whole image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's a very interesting. It's like, you know, it goes back a little bit to the point of view. Like, how can you even look at something that looks like that? You know, but it's real because we've experienced this type of seeing in our lives. He just is able to capture that for us and let us know that we have. You know, and that's the beauty somehow. And that's one of the best things about painting, that actually doing painting. And why I think it's something any person in the world should do, everybody, almost, because it's like just that experience of seeing something that you don't realize that you're seeing is so much is such a huge benefit or powerful thing for us, you know.
Hey, Dov,
Yep.
when Gauguin paint this, it's very intense. The expression of the guy is almost like, oh my God, I want to eat that apple. But did he paint this with like a model in front of him, or is it just from his memory of someone who is so tempting to do something, but there's that table in front of him that kind of prevented him to do something?
I think that there's definitely a model at some point. I don't know if it's only with the model. I think you could definitely continue the work afterwards. You know, it's I'm sure he sat in front of this person, but then who knows if he didn't continue working on it. And then that memory of him is what kind of injects the way to continue to paint, you know. Shall I move to two more?
I think so, yeah.
Yep. I'm jumping to Degas here. And what I love about Degas, you know, and specifically his sculptures, I'll start with that, is if you remember, we looked at Giacometti, and Giacometti is kind of creating something very similar to painting in a sense, because he gives you your view, your point of view, and he projects spaces almost like that. But I think Degas is such a great sculpture because it's so round. You know, you feel you can move around this figure and it will stay balanced. You know, the tension in the muscles will continuously be engaged. It's just he's such a great draftsman, and that ability to draw so well generated these sculptures that are so circular, you know, and the balance, you know, she's standing on this leg and it's so tense and moving and able to carry the body, you know, in a real way. And it's just amazing. And I think that's what made him such a good painter as well, because he then paints and understands certain things about the body and how it looks, how it feels from a lot of different angles, and he knows how to give that to the viewer. He knows how to add that ability for us to look at it. And this is a beautiful painting in the Met, and it's, I always look at, you know, this can here mimics the figure, you know, and so there's that, and it's just to paint this figure this way, he needed to know how to sculpt like that. He needed to know how to move, you know, to draw something all at 360 degrees, you know, and continuously move. So I just wanted to show that, and then move to the next quickly. Before I go that, I want to go here. This is a Degas painting of a friend of his, a good friend of his. And, you know, it's just, it's all of that knowledge that he has, you know, he brings to this painting, and it's a big painting. And one of the things that I'm especially amazed by this work is the fact that you can't pull yourself away from this guy's eyes. You continuously move around and you see these paintings on the side. You move in a circle away, but the way he looks at you, you keep on going back. It's like it's a magnet. So there's just this amazing way of composing something to get you to that place, get you there. And then Gorky, this is Arshak Gorky, who is Armenian. And this is a drawing of his mom. She died in the Armenian Holocaust. And the way he projects, you know, the eyes here are so emotional and felt and contain a huge amount of love that he has for her, and longing and memory. They're very different, you know. The guy is much more cold in a way, and almost keeps this this person empty, so we can fill ourselves in there or bring something else to a mystery, you know. And Gorky feels all the love that a son can have to a mom, you know, and we immediately connect in that way. Yeah, and any thoughts on these two pieces, the Degas sculpture and dancers, then the Degas person, and then the Gorky?
Well, it's interesting what you described between those two pieces. From my experiences of both their artwork, that kind of describes them for me a little bit, which is funny because Gorky's, I mean, most of his stuff I've seen of his is totally abstract, but the pieces that are not are the ones that I connect with more.
Yeah.
And that's really true. Like Degas, there is always a little bit of a separation or a coldness to him, which isn't bad. Not again, not qualitative, but that's interesting. Yeah.
I think that's what struck me with that painting recently, is that how cold it is in that way. But it's also, I think I saw it in a positive way for the first time, because I felt like, because he doesn't put himself there, he lets me fill that person. I can project my friend Chris now, or not, you know what I mean? I can project you into the pain, or I can project myself in there, because he stayed out. He gave me that ability. Where in Gorky, I mean, you connect to that love, you know, but it's so emotional. It's so much there, but.
Where is that painting?
Which one?
The Degas painting, where is it?
That Degas painting is in the Met.
It's in the Met?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Hey, Dov,
and it's funny you ask, because I missed it for 20 years going there. Until like 2 months ago.
Do you think that
Degas types are pretty, you know, didn't he do monotypes that were very different, very loose and?
Which one? Sorry.
His monotypes.
Yeah. Those are different. Yeah. Yep. Very loose. Right.
On the Gorky, his body position, do you think that that was intentional to focus us on the expression in the eyes?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think he projected so much into those eyes, and projected so much of his feelings, you know, and however he did it, you know, I don't know, but that's the magic.
That's the magic.
Both paintings, they follow the rule of thirds, so our eyes automatically goes that way. It's very pleasing to have those focal point in that area of the canvas anyway. So it draw our eyes to those eyes and the face of the sitting guy. But the sitting guy, there's a like a frame next to him, to the left of him, that's kind of a little bit distracting to me. So.
You mean here?
No, in the gold frame, right?
Oh, here.
Yeah, maybe the painting isn't totally about the guy.
Yeah, it's about painting. I think it's about painting. This painting. It's a portrait of painting. You get all of these, you know, on the easel, and this and this and this and this.
Yeah, I think it's in a studio somewhere.
And I also know that this guy was a painter, and he taught Degas a lot. He actually was kind of a mentor to him a little bit early on.
So hey, Dov.
Yeah.
Maybe let's bring it back to the group 1 second. I see you have some more slides here.
Yeah.
We're about at the end of the hour.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, the fact that you still have a couple slides left is actually kind of a cool thing, because
absolutely,
you know, that's how engaged we are. We're in the conversations. So well done.
Yeah.
But I think it's like probably a good idea to keep these to an hour.
Absolutely.
For organization. So everybody, thank you very, very much for joining us. And Dov, thanks very much for your insights as always.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I love the conversation. It's great. So,
Fun.
I
thank you
started
so much.
on a painting like what you said, so it's kind of forcing me to look at a painting in certain way nowadays. It's like, oh, look at that triangle. So
That's cool.
so thank you for sharing your knowledge, by the way.
Thank
So
you.
very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
It's an honor to and I think everyone who shares is sharing their knowledge. It's really that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'll reiterate it again, just think of this as we're like sitting around a fairly large table at a bar somewhere, and you're welcome to join in at any time, or not. It's totally fine not to. And if you have any, artist friends, let them know about it too. If you have some artist friends who want to join in, let us know, and we can invite them too.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you guys
everyone.
next time.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.